Welcome to the And She Looked Up Creative Hour podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and I'm an artist and an entrepreneur. And yes, those two things can go together. This podcast is for the artists, the creatives, and the makers who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. And this week, I am really excited to welcome Alana Ruoso to the podcast. Welcome, Alana.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. So, for those of you who may not be familiar with Alana, she is a certified success coach for designers, creatives, and professionals who deep down know that they can do better, but keep falling short of where they want to go. I think that might apply to a few of us.
Yeah.
Alana has over 20 years of corporate and creative experience. She's a mentor with young women in business. She has spoken at Design Thinkers, which is Canada's largest graphic design conference. And she works with her clients to show them how to ditch struggle, own their value, and move their career from vanilla success to spectacular triumph, which I think is something we all want. And I am really excited about this episode today. Today, Alana and I are going to be talking about 10 curious ways that we self-sabotage. And when I was looking through the list, there's definitely a few that I could put check marks next to.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, let's get to know Alana a little bit better. Alana, one of the questions I ask everybody who comes on the show is, did you identify as a creative when you were a kid?
Yeah, I love this question. And I'm going to say yes, I was definitely a creative kid right from the start. Loved making things. I was always in the basement I had my own little drafting table. My dad was a draftsman that he gave me, and I was always creating things. And right from the get-go, I was in that space and spent a lot of my childhood in elementary school years. In art classes, I was always the kid that everyone asked me to draw them something, like for Valentine's Day, can you draw me some hearts for my card? And it was pretty clear that was what I enjoyed doing, and I did enjoy doing it. And then I ended up I just kept going right through to high school and college. So it was something I knew that I loved. But I also did love business. So I was always a little bit torn, to be honest, right from my very young age, kind of which path to take. But for a variety of reasons, I'm really happy I stayed in that creative path.
And you went on to do graphic design, actually. Mm-hmm. That's what you did before you became a coach.
Yeah, definitely my specialty. And I loved anything graphic. So I'm just like a 2D person. I love anything bold, graphic. I'm obsessed with anything very 60s looking, and mid-century modern design just makes me so happy. And it just really does. And so when I went into high school, I actually went to high school in Toronto that had a really interesting creative program. You could specialize, and I did 3 years of graphic design in high school before I even got to college. So I did an intensive program there. I did illustration and life drawing and all of that. So I was really immersed in it in high school, and it was really encouraged in high school. So I think, honestly, I did 5 years of high school back then. You had to do 5, and it completely shaped my life. And what's crazy is that I almost didn't go to that high school, and I can only think about what would have happened if I hadn't. My dad really wanted me to go to an all-girls school, and that my sister went to, and I was like, nope, that's not for me. I need to do this program. And luckily, a friend of mine really pushed for me to get into it. So yeah, that was one of the things that totally changed my life, and it was an amazing experience.
That is amazing, because I think those programs are quite common across the country now, but I know when I went to high school, that was not an option where I went to school, and I really wish it had been. It would have been so different for me.
Completely different. Yeah. And it was, by the time I got to the end of high school, I had a fully fleshed out portfolio. Getting into art school was not going to be a challenge. It was not that hard because we were just really set up.
You were prepared. Yeah.
We were prepared. Yeah.
Definitely. And you wound up going to OCAD, which is probably one of the best known design schools in the country, or creative schools in the country. And yes, to get into somewhere like that, you need to have a portfolio, and you need to have all the pieces that are to prove that you deserve the
Yeah,
place there. So
totally. Now, having said that, I'm sure there's lots of people that get into OCAD, and if anyone's younger that's listening, who literally don't go to art school and completely, rock their creative career and don't follow that path. So I think you can really do it anyway. But for me, like knowing that I like school, I like structure, I like having tasks and deadlines, so it worked really well for me, and I did work well under pressure. So because it was pretty intense, but I'm really happy that I took that path. Yeah.
yeah, that was something. I didn't wind up going back to school for design until I was in my 30s. So just
Mm.
because it wasn't really an option when I was in
Yeah.
high school. So
Yeah, and you can do it whenever. That's the thing about education. Like that's what
yes,
I love stories like that. You can absolutely do it at any time, and creativity knows no timeline and no boundaries.
absolutely. And as you mentioned, like for people who are just starting out today,
Hmm.
I am just blown away when I don't have kids, but when I see my friends' kids and
Yeah.
the things they have access to today when they're
Yes.
when they're 12, 13, and
Yes.
you
I
know,
know.
just an iPad and Apple Pencil, and they're creating crazy stuff that
It's amazing.
I love it. I love watching how
Hmm.
creative they
Hmm.
are, and
Hmm.
it's pure discovery for them. They're not learning
Yes.
it in a structured environment at all. They're just figuring it out, and it's
Figuring
really
it
cool.
out. I know. I feel like as adults we need to get back into that space more, but that's another
Yes.
conversation. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. On that note, let's dive
Hmm.
into our topic today. And
Sure.
I am really excited about this because, as I mentioned at the top, we're going to be talking about 10 curious ways that we self-sabotage. And the interesting thing about this is that I think, first of all, I think every single item on this list, there's going to be somebody listening who can
Hmm.
identify with at least one of these, if not more, if not maybe all of them. But I think the interesting thing about this, and we talked a little bit about this before we jumped on to record, is that some of these are things we don't even notice that we're
Hmm.
doing. And sometimes we don't notice we've done them for months or years afterwards. It's not till we look back that we realize. So I think by talking about this today, I'm hoping that we can put some of these out there and that people might hear themselves in them
Hmm.
and recognize that maybe they're doing things that are making it more difficult for them to get to where they want to be without even knowing that that's what they're doing.
Oh, I'm going to guarantee everyone listening is somehow making things more difficult than they need it to be.
Yes,
That's just the human way. And
absolutely.
why I love that we're having this discussion is it's hopefully going to bring some awareness, and I will be fully honest, everything on my list comes from experience and that I've done or I see in my clients or people in my life. And it's very sneaky, and the truth is that any kind of awareness that you get over your behavior or patterns is going to completely change your potential for success. That's
Yes,
partly why I love coaching and talking about these things.
yes, yes. First one on your list is overeating, oversleeping, overworking, or over everything.
Yeah. And what I'm going to do is just set up what self sabotage is,
Yes,
just
let's
for
do that
listeners,
first.
because I was just thinking
Yeah.
sometimes we talk about things and it's so obvious, but I usually define self sabotage as something that manifests as a thought or a behavior, and it keeps you away from achieving your goals and having success. So it's like some kind of barrier, and it's usually something that we're setting up. Uh, ourselves. That's why it's a self sabotage. It's not an external situation, it's something internal. It's usually completely avoidable, but it's something that we do unconsciously a lot of the time, to that point of when we're not aware that we're doing it, that kind of stops us from getting what we think we really want.
It's almost, would you say it's almost a manifestation of a fear that we haven't uncovered?
Yeah, I mean, fear is at the bottom of everything.
Yeah.
So where that fear is coming from, why that fear is there, that's unique to most people. It
Mm-hmm.
can be like small things, it can be big things, it can be something that's manifested from the childhood. But absolutely, there's a fear at the end of this, at the bottom of it, and there's as many people who have a fear of success as fear of failure. It doesn't have to be. Everyone thinks I'm so scared of failing. I will tell you that fear of success is something that I coach a lot of people on, and that is absolutely huge. And that was actually more of my personal challenge than the failure part. I was actually really good at failure, really comfortable with it. So yeah, looking at that at the bottom, the fear, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And I think you made an interesting point there, that fear of success is something
Mm-hmm.
that, because it sounds silly to say
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid of being successful, right? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to say I'm afraid to fail because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that makes sense, but it's counterintuitive to feel that you're afraid of being successful, and yet so many of us
Oh,
are.
yeah. Oh,
I'm like
that's,
you.
yeah.
I can fail all day long. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't
Mm-hmm.
bother me,
Mm-hmm.
but I do have blocks around being successful.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to generalize here, but I do think that is true for a lot of creatives.
Mm.
And I mean, listen, creativity and creative work has been my life for so long, and I see it a lot. And I think there's sometimes the starving artist thing comes in. That's like one
Mm-hmm.
thing, and if they're
Yeah.
successful, like what's that going to mean? It's what's going to happen to my life, and that is one, like, if anyone's just looking for some quick question to ask themselves to journal on, what would happen if I was truly successful? And you can first maybe just think about what your success looks like. So I call myself a success coach, and part of what I do is figuring out what that means to each person. It's completely different for everybody. So it's just like a general term, but what would happen if you were actually truly successful, and kind of write out a scenario, and you'll start to see like things pop up that are those fears that we were talking about. So you
Mm-hmm.
could be scared of losing friends, scared of losing respect from certain people, scared of having to handle money,
Mm-hmm.
scared of, so many things will pop up. Yeah.
There's a lot that
Mm-hmm.
floats below the surface in all of this.
Yeah. Back to the list.
Yeah. So overeating, oversleeping, overworking, over
Yes.
everything. I think
Yes.
probably all of us have done one of the overs at
Yeah,
some
the
point.
overs. Yeah, the overs are avoidance. So avoiding something, they're usually a way of distracting. And sometimes procrastination, and sometimes I'm careful around the word procrastination, because sometimes I think procrastination is actually processing, like you're just actually having to give yourself time, especially
Yeah.
as a creative, to work something through. So I think organizing your sock drawer is actually really effective sometimes for processing. But the overeating, oversleeping, for me personally, being busy. So I wrote a blog post a while back last year. I think it was called "How Being Busy Was My Favorite Form of Self-Sabotage," and that really sums up basically my whole life and my whole platform for being a coach, because it was distracting myself, keeping myself tired. So when let's say you're overscheduling and overworking, you're really keeping yourself in a state of exhaustion. Well, when you're in that state of exhaustion, how likely are you going to be successful at what you want to do? You're not as likely. So that's a challenging one, and I think it's really challenging because our society generally encourages workaholic tendencies.
Yeah. I never thought of it in the way that you just said, keeping yourself tired. That's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting.
Yeah, your
Yeah.
brain gets tired like for me, it was a physical, like I was
Mm-hmm.
physically burning myself out. So I'm a pretty sensitive person. I have like a kind of body that will tell me instantly if it's out of whack or something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't listen to that for many years, and I was getting, for me, it usually manifested in the form of migraines. I talk about that quite a bit, migraines and anxiety. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it was like the more I did, the more I could disperse my energy and disperse myself. And then I never really also had to focus on one thing and make one thing truly successful.
Yeah.
So I was like creating a web of distraction, basically.
Yeah. That
Mhm.
is
Yeah,
very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
So what can we do to avoid that, I guess?
yeah. So you first want to start noticing when you're feeling out of whack. So usually I like to use the term out of alignment. Some people say out of balance. Balance, I never resonated with that word, because I think sometimes you have to be out of balance
Yeah, I
to be
agree.
in
I
alignment. So I never really got on board with that. But for me, I love the word alignment. It's actually my word that I've picked for 2021 in terms of
oh,
what I want to achieve, is just my intention. And so you really want us to start, if you can, take notes of when you're feeling out of whack. Journaling about your day, starting to write things down, noticing when you're getting triggered. Actually, that's an interesting thing I started in the last few months, is specifically a trigger journal. So this is when I get really triggered or upset or emotionally off the charts about something, and I write that thing down to see what's going on. So you really want to start getting the awareness of how you're doing things in your life.
yeah. That's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Are you a big proponent of journaling as a way to work through things? Does that really work for you?
I am. I was just saying this to someone the other day. Although I'm really failing at journaling this year, I'm like for some reason I'm struggling. So just to let everyone know, like, it doesn't matter how much you know about this stuff. I'm really rocking it in other things, but I'm struggling with journaling this year. So I do write myself at least little notes every day and set my intention. So I'm doing it, and I absolutely do believe putting pen to paper is really important in terms of changing behaviors, because you literally do create different synapses in your brain when you start writing things down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So I find for me, the one that I struggle with is either overeating or undereating. Mm-hmm. Like what stress triggers an eating response for me. Like sometimes, and the thing that I haven't figured out is like when it triggers the overeating and when it triggers the undereating. Like there's sometimes when I'm stressed where I can't even think about food. And then there's other times where I'm just eating and I'm not even thinking about what I'm putting in my mouth. I'm not hungry. I'm just... It's just a thing to do. It's almost like a nervous response, you know?
Sure. I know. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I think it's really common. And that's super normal, because we're just, as human beings, try to process stress all day long. And sometimes we do it in healthy ways and sometimes not in healthy ways. Yeah.
So what are some healthy ways we can channel that into instead of the overeating and the oversleeping? We've talked about journaling, but are there some other things that people can do?
Yeah. The physical activity. And so I tend to talk a lot about doing something physical every day. That's one thing that I'm not saying go all Gillian Anderson on me and start working out like a maniac. So I actually think that's kind of toxic to go too crazy, but doing any physical movement like walking, especially that we're in pandemic times right now. And so we're limited in terms of what we can do, but going out, the walking thing is really important. Getting in touch with those moments when you are in the overeating and undereating, like if you can actually just step back and actually think of the emotion that you're feeling when let's say you are in the middle of overeating or just starting to, it's like, if you can take that moment, and it's really hard, I'm not saying it's easy, but to take that moment and say, what is the actual emotion that I'm feeling as I'm in this? And even if you can just be like anger and you just write that down, then you start to see that you might have to look at ways to release some anger. And for different people, it's different things, but maybe that's a time when you need to go for the walk or do a workout or whatever it is that you need to do. So yeah, I'm a big proponent in like getting in touch, like doing something physical to kind of counteract some of those behaviors that we do.
Absolutely. I'm a huge proponent of doing something. I really struggle with seasonal effectiveness disorder, and January in Vancouver is gray.
It's real. Yeah, no, it's real.
And the thing so every January since I really was able to isolate that this was happening is January, I up my step count from 10 to 12 or 15,000 a day. And it's amazing what those extra, I mean, you have to plan it, right? I mean, that's a lot of steps, but it's amazing what a difference those extra 3,000 steps can make in a day. Like it keeps me off medication. And I'm not saying that, there are times where you need to be on medication if you're suffering from depression, but for me, that is the thing that just keeps me functioning. And it's, and I don't do anything crazy. It's just going out for a walk, maybe a run, but it's just, keep moving, just moving, have a dance.
Keep moving and find what your body likes. And I just think that's, I think like our culture is also much like treating exercise like it's this just like thing it's a to-do list thing, whereas opposed to more the lifestyle thing. And listen, the walking thing, like we are, as humans, are made to walk. So I think it's one of the easiest things that we can do. It's like, I think we need to do what's most natural to us as humans. And, you don't have to get on a rowing machine if you hate rowing. Don't do it.
Don't have to get all sweaty if you don't.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. No. Yeah.
Okay, so the second one on the list is intentionally burning a bridge. And I thought this was an interesting one because I actually do think there's times where burning a bridge is not a bad thing. But
yes.
But I can see where it would definitely, Tell us a little bit more about it.
It's interesting. I was like, wow, funny that I put this number 2 because I feel it's like a hard-hitting one. It's really a little bit intense. So burning a bridge can sometimes be necessary. And I had burned a bridge with a company in Toronto. They really were treating their freelancers in a deplorable way. And that was an intentional decision that I felt really good about. That was kind of a one-off thing. The intentionally burning a bridge, if you're doing it multiple times, especially, what can be the cause is that you're actually wanting to kind of close the door on potential options for success. You're making it harder for yourself to be in the successful position, and you're also blaming others for what's going wrong in your life. There's a great analogy, it's kind of like a little funny story, that if every time you go into a bar fight breaks out, maybe you're the one to blame. So it's like, if you keep burning a bridge, maybe maybe your anger is taking over, but you're also maybe like trying to make things harder for yourself by making it harder to stay in that industry, and then blaming others for, well, I would be successful if it wasn't for them, but they screwed me over, so I'm just going to I've shut that door, I can't work with them. So you can sometimes be making things harder for yourself, which is a form of self-sabotage.
Yeah, that's I think I was thinking about this one this morning, and the role that social media, I think, plays in this. This one really was interesting to me. I don't think I've ever done this intentionally. It's something I don't think I've ever. I can't even think of a time where I've purposely burned a bridge, but I've seen so many people do it in a very public way, and it's fascinating to me. I'm very new to the world of Etsy, so late last year I joined a lot of Etsy communities on Reddit and Facebook, and seeing the way people talk about their customers publicly in public forums, to me is so interesting, and it brought back a memory of every fall I go to Tofino for storm watching season, and a few years ago I was on TripAdvisor looking for a new place to stay. I wanted to try somewhere new, and some friends had recommended this place that they love, and I was looking at the reviews, and the reviews were like very positive, but every now and then there would be somebody who would maybe not have the 5-star experience. They would have the 3-star or the 4-star, so they're not having a horrible experience, but it wasn't quite what they had hoped, and they would leave a comment that was kind of constructive, like, something like, it would have been really nice if there had been somebody there to greet us when we came in the door, kind of thing. And the owner of the resort had gone in and was responding to every single one of these comments in a horrible way. Like just saying, well, maybe you should have come at a different time. Like just turning it around on them. And the thing that happened is, I, as a customer, potential client, customer, was like, you know what, I don't want to stay where this man is going to yell at me if I have a problem.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
And I don't think he realized what he was doing. I don't think he realized he was just sabotaging himself. Very publicly.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely needs some customer service training. Like, that's number one. Because not everyone, it doesn't come innately to everyone.
No, it doesn't.
It's a sign of anger. And here's what's interesting about anger. So anytime you're burning a bridge, there's the anger. Anger is always a secondary emotion. Anger is second to something else, and it's usually hurt. So you can say, I feel angry. It's like, well, you are feeling angry 100%. But what is actually making you feel angry? You always have to dig deeper. And that's the interesting thing about anger.
Yes, that's, I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So people burning bridges, it's usually that they're really hurt with the company or something went wrong. But the thing is, the more that if you keep burning bridges, you will eventually close your options for success if you're in a specific industry, especially. So, a one-off time, but it's really looking at if you keep doing it, if that's a pattern of yours. Again, I love looking at patterns because that's when you're going to start seeing your blocks. Then you're setting yourself up for some trouble.
Yeah. So maybe that's like you mentioned with the bar fight. Maybe if you're not feeling happy with where you're at, and you're feeling like there's nobody that you can work with, or nobody that understands you, maybe you need to have a look deeper into.
Yes, because that's actually victim mode. So that's what I call whiny baby victim mode, and I mean that with love. Like, I say it with love, because I do it. I've done it myself. I've 100% been a victim. It's like, the world's against me. No one gets me. Everyone's hurting me. Look at me. Like, look what they've done to me. And the thing is, if you stay in that situation, if you stay in that mode, you are closing doors, and you're making things way more difficult than they need to be.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between venting to a couple of friends or a couple of colleagues. I mean, we all do that. We all have days where...
I was doing something this morning. I had a good 30-minute vent session with someone. Yeah, it was very therapeutic. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's totally fine. Yeah. But then there's the difference between putting that out there for the whole world to see as well.
And if you're moving through life like that constantly. So there's some good thing, like there's that's what a coach is really good at figuring out too, is like, are you actually showing up this way every single day, and what are you getting out of it? So
Yeah.
yeah.
So the next on the list was showing up late to an important meeting. I can honestly say I've never done this. I am like a punctuality freak. So
That's good. No, that's
but
really good. So lateness is interesting, and it can be an important meeting. It can be a client call. It can be like showing up to a podcast
mhm.
recording, whatever it is. Showing up to something late, that's really important, which is all about creating havoc and making things harder than they need to be. So you're creating a struggle energy around what you're doing, because if you just got in on time, obviously that's going to be way less stressful. So if, again, this is the thing with the self-sabotage, is looking at those patterns and the recurrences. So if this is something you do often, that's even more of a red flag. But showing up late to something is obviously not an ideal situation, and it creates a lot of stress when there doesn't need to be stress. And so are you making things harder on yourself by doing this? And usually the answer is yes.
Yeah, so this would be different than, I mean, there are some people who just never show up on time for anything ever in
Yes. And
in
so
their life.
if I'm going to give an interesting perspective on that, someone pointed this out to me, and I'm not a late person either. Once in a blue moon, I'm late, but rarely. Um, if you're constantly late to something, it also could be a sign that you need the attention, which is
Oh,
sometimes a harsh truth. But picture it. Remember when we used to go to things in person? So
yes.
let's say you're going to a lecture in person, and there's always one or two people that come in late. Well, it's very disruptive. It can be a subconscious need for that person to actually get attention.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes, because the
Mm-hmm.
whole room will turn to look at
Yep,
you walking in the door.
absolutely.
Yeah, I never thought
And
of
then
it
you
that
have to
way.
apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry, but you
Hmm.
know what? All eyes are on you. So that's just something to think about. I mean, that's obviously a separate conversation, but um, usually in this case, what I'm thinking of is just like, you know where you need to be for this important thing that's actually going to bring you success. So
Right.
why would you get in your own way and not like get there really early or be really prepared for what you need to do? And if you're not doing that, you have to ask yourself why.
Is there a way that you can, like, I think one of the things with all of these is like, how do you fix the behavior? I don't know if you know if
Mhm.
fix is the right word, but like
Yeah,
address the behavior, I guess. Or
yeah. You want to engage in new behaviors. That's the way I love to think about it. So you're trying to engage, and you're going to probably fail miserably a lot of times because we're just used to doing things the way we do. Like we are literally hardwired, and we go into patterns and like. But if this is something that you know that you've maybe seen before in yourself, or start to think about it, like, oh my gosh, did you show up to 4 meetings late last week? And this can be in a corporate job or as a freelancer, as a business owner. So um, are you making things harder on yourself? So if you start to see that that's a potential, or you have done it, then you actually need to do the pre-planning, and you'd be like, okay, so my goal is to actually arrive to this thing 15 minutes early. And that's going to be really, really, really uncomfortable. It's going to feel completely weird. You're going to feel like you're wasting time, because why would I get anywhere 15 minutes early when I could be spending those 15 minutes doing, an Instagram post or whatever it is. So it's going to be really, really uncomfortable. That's what's hard about trying to engage in new behaviors.
yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of work that has to go on behind the scenes here to kind of, and
Yeah,
that's a
it's
whole
all work.
different, yeah, it is. That's a whole different
It's all work.
conversation almost.
Yeah.
The next one on the list, this is one that I have a big check mark next to. Putting the bare minimum into a project you could rock.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see that. I do this all the time. I see people doing this all the time. This one to me is just screams, I don't want to succeed. Like I don't want to be noticed. I don't want to succeed. I don't
Yeah.
want people to say nice things about me.
Yes.
Like there's
Yeah.
just so many things underneath that one. Yeah.
I love that you just use the word notice, because that's kind of what I had just kind of written down as a talking point. It's like it's about being noticeable.
Yeah.
So it's afraid of shining, and it's a fear of being noticeable and standing out, and that is a deep fear for a lot of people, especially in that creative space where you're really vulnerable and you're really showcasing your work and like putting yourself out there. So sometimes just putting in the bare minimum is, it's keeping your kind of career in that vanilla success space that I talk about. And I was really good at this vanilla success, like kind of just sort of sitting there, like kind of successful, but not really rocking things.
Enough to
So
pay the bills kind of thing.
enough to pay the bills, just kind of like a little bit of attention. But so for me, this was a huge thing, like just really pushing myself. And because I realized that staying in that kind of world of mediocrity was absolutely self-sabotage. I was capable of way more. I am capable of way more. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
most people are far more capable than they think they are.
Yeah.
I think women tend to be so
Mhm.
much
Mhm.
better at this
Mhm.
if
Oh,
that's
very. Yeah.
than men are. I think we definitely just have more of us. I've noticed this with my own design clients, and I've mentioned this in a previous episode where I will have clients who will obsess over the tiniest little details of a project, because it's just a way to delay putting themselves out there.
Mhm.
And I do a lot of branding for clients. So my work
Yes.
is really based around putting themselves out there. And
Mhm.
it's so interesting to me to work with. I don't work with a lot of men anymore, but in the early part of my freelance career, I did. And the guys were always like, whatever, I just want to get it out there. Come on, let's just keep moving, right?
Oh, yep. I love that you're telling the story again too, because this is so applicable. It is so true. It is 100% true. It's
Yeah, and
yeah.
the things the women would get caught up on were not. It would be like trying to decide between two shades of almost identical blue.
Mhm.
Like
Like
it's
one of
not.
them is really going to make your branding. No, and also as a branding expert, I'm going to tell you, no, it doesn't matter. You can probably make that yellow and it will still be fine. So, yeah, my mantra that I adopted a few years ago is done is better than perfect.
Yes, that's a big one
And,
for me. I love that.
I've heard that one. And I'm a former perfectionist. I'm a workaholic, recovering. I'm all those things. And so that has been huge for me. Like, I can look at if I was to look at my own website and critique it, there's like 30 things probably that are not quite right or misaligned. And like, but you know what? No one's noticing them. So far, no one's gotten back to me with any critique or said it's not good. So I'm just going to let that go. And the freedom that comes with that is amazing, and you do get closer to your success faster. So absolutely, just kind of doing that bare minimum is a form of self-sabotage, um, and also the kind of over critiquing perfectionist thing vibe that's gonna set you back as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Perfectionism. I'm also a recovering
Yeah,
perfectionist.
so many women, to your point, it's a because there's just there's the people pleaser in a lot of us,
Hmm.
and that can come out in perfectionism.
I think
Mhm.
sometimes perfectionism is a way to procrastinate something you don't want to
Yes.
do. Okay, number 5. This is
Mhm.
another one I do all the time too. Letting a call from a
Yeah.
client go to voicemail when you could answer it.
Yeah, and I like this one. And these are like little things, but and they can be applied. Like you could spin them a little bit. It's not just about the voicemail, but it could be the email or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's definitely the fear is there. Like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to say to this client, and I don't know if I have what it takes to talk to this client. So I'm just going to keep crunching on my potato chips over here and watch the phone ring and just let it go and think about what they said, and then I'll come up with a good response and I'll call them back.
Yes.
So I mean, listen, you're slowing down your success. Like you are literally, because what happens if you try and get a hold of them and you can't get a hold of them? Like you are sabotaging a potential client. So if you're not taking a client on, how are you actually supposed to build your business and your success?
Yes. I'm laughing here
It's
because it's just
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. It's like I've all done it. You just look at your phone and you're like, the client. You're like, oh my god, the client's calling me, and you're like, just looking at it, and it just keeps going, and then eventually it stops ringing, right? So you have to like any successful business person. Do you think like Richard Branson's not picking up the phone because that's an extreme example, but like anyone who's really successful in their business is going to pick up the phone no matter what, even if they're not in the mood, because they know it's part of creating the business, building profitability. So pushing through that fear and picking up the call is really really important. It's like a small thing that we do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me it's absolutely I'm an introvert, and I hate
Mm-hmm.
talking on the phone. But
Yeah.
aside from that, it really is. I don't think well on my feet. I don't feel like I think well on my feet, and I'm just so afraid that I'm going
Mm.
to not be able to respond or not be able to think of that I'm going to get caught off guard. I like to prepare.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So that's a big part of it for me, but also part of it is I just don't the number of times where it's been something bad is
Mm-hmm.
so minimal.
Minimal. Yeah.
But it's just, I don't know, there's just a really weird, I literally, if my phone starts ringing next to me, I can feel my gut just clench, like,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Totally. It's that fear, and then it's so easy to go to avoidance, right? It's just like, I'm just not going to deal with that right now. So the trick there is literally to do exactly what you don't want to do, and it's pick up the phone. So when you're trying to make a change, I love the idea of just doing a 180. So literally do the exact opposite of what you normally do. So if you normally let it go to voicemail, then what you're going to do is you're going to answer that phone and you're going to be even more excited.
Yeah.
And if you're worried about what you're going to say, I think it's a great idea to have some talking points on Post-its or a piece of paper that's near you that are kind of things that you say to a client, or if you're in that position where they're asking you to, let's say, quote on something and you don't know what to give the price, you just come up with a catchphrase or a little answer that explains that you'll get back to them in writing with a price or something like that. You need to be prepared for those kind of difficult moments, because it is hard to think on your feet. Absolutely. It gets easier with time and the more you do it. So the more you pick up that phone, the easier it's going to be.
It really does. And I've learned over the years that there is nothing wrong with saying that, you know what, I need to research that a little and get back to you, or I need to give that some thought, or let me put together a quote for you that I can send you later. Those kinds of things. So I've gotten better at that. But when I was first starting out, that was just really challenging for me. But even now, I'm well into my 40s and I still get that, like that physical gut reaction to a phone call.
Yes.
So
and I think it's just a matter of like, and I get that too. Sometimes it's just like embracing that it's going to be uncomfortable and just being like, okay, I don't like that this feels like gross in my stomach, but it just is what it is. And that's just what I'm going to move through. For some people, it's not that hard. For some people it is. And that's just the way it is. Yeah.
I know. It's so, it's funny. In my other business, I have a business partner and he is complete opposite of me. He will jump on a phone call. He will answer an email. And if we're having a difficult exchange with a client or something, I'll be the one to be like, I'll look at that later. And he's the one who's got it open right away. And is like, did you see what they said? And I'll be like, no, I didn't see what they said. So he's the complete opposite, but I am definitely,
And it is true, like some of us do need more time to process, and like that is totally okay. So it's not like, if you need to wait a couple hours to open an email, it's just noticing though that when you're really avoiding something, what's actually happening here.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay, so next on the list is, I'm going to actually go out on a limb and say I think probably every single person that is listening to this has done this one. Constantly telling yourself, I don't know, when in fact you do.
This one popped up because I had a friend, and I just started one day tuning into the fact that every conversation multiple times was just always defaulting to, I don't know, like as a, I don't know, and like just almost part of just a way of talking. But it was like hundreds and hundreds of times in our conversations that she was always using this term. And what I've seen it in clients as well. So this like kind of negative self-talk is really downplaying your abilities, and it's keeping yourself stuck. Because if you think about it, if you're constantly telling yourself that you don't know, then how are you going to get anywhere? How are you going to be successful? And it's like you're literally almost like rewiring your brain to think that you can't do something. So you're absolutely self-sabotaging yourself.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. Me and a friend have been chatting about this quite a bit, and she's actually been a guest host on the podcast, and we talked about it in one of her episodes. But we are both trying new things right now that relating to our businesses. And for her, she's diving into YouTube and video production and video editing. And one of the things we've talked about is how it's so hard to go back to being a beginner.
Yeah.
And to put things off because you don't know how to do them, or like you said, you're never going to know how to do them if you don't start somewhere. But I think for her and for me, one of the things we notice is that you're so afraid to put something new out there because it's not going to be the quality that you want it to be in your head, because you're a beginner, you're starting, you're learning, and it will get better the more you do it. But it's it is, again, I think this fear of not looking good enough, not of putting yourself out there, of trying something new, of a fear of what people are going to think of it. When honestly, she showed me her first few videos, and as I'm looking at them, I'm like, they look great. And she's like, no, this is all.
Yeah.
We're the only people who see those things.
Yeah.
Most other people are not seeing,
Yeah.
not seeing that we're a beginner. So it's really, that's so interesting to me. And I think sometimes too, we say, I don't know, when we do know in our gut. Like that's another way to look at that. Like our gut is saying, you shouldn't do this, or you should do this, or you need to do this. And we're ignoring it and just saying, oh, I don't know. I don't know if that's for me.
It's deflection.
Yeah.
It's deflection and avoidance. Like really, there's avoidance as a theme to all of these things, but it's deflection and avoidance in a huge way. And one thing I want people to really be conscious of is if they're using that in their vocabulary a lot of the time. So if someone's just asking you a question, you're like, I don't know. And it's just like it's like almost like a knee jerk reaction to like as a response. That's really, really interesting, because you need to change. You literally need to start changing what you're saying. And then it can be just like, let me think about that is a great way, instead of saying, I don't know. And of course, there's going to be things that you legitimately don't know. For example, as you said, starting a YouTube channel and things like that. But we always know more than we think we do. And the goal is to really build yourself up so that you can be successful. And how is constantly telling yourself that you don't know going to build yourself up? It's not going to. It's going to keep you really stuck.
It's interesting how you said watching for it in your speech.
Yes.
I've had the same experience with the word just. And somebody told me to take that word out of it, like, I'm just doing this, or I'm just calling you. Like it's immediately putting yourself down in a very subtle way.
So subtle. I think that became really a popular topic. There's an amazing article on LinkedIn about that word just that I think went viral a few years ago. And I reread it recently. If you just Google it, you'll find it. And it is especially something that women do for sure. Yeah. And in emails, it's also really easy for it. I just need you to take a look at this and things like that. And absolutely, this is kind of in the same category. Because we're downplaying our abilities and keeping ourselves down. Yeah.
So if we find ourselves saying that over and over again, what are some things we can substitute in there? So instead of saying, I don't know, like you said, let me do some research on that. Or,
so the first thing to do, whenever you're saying something, literally, like actually using your words and saying something that you don't want to say, or that you catch yourself. First of all, you need to start catching yourself, or ask your friends to start catching yourself on something. This is, I can't remember where I learned this technique from, but you basically just say to yourself, and you can say it in your head or out loud, cancel. I don't know if you've heard about this technique, but you are, as soon as you say something that you really don't want to hear, like for example, sometimes people, their catchphrase is kind of like, oh, I never know how to do anything, or I'm always, failing. And then you just have to say cancel. So you need to bring awareness to the fact that you've just said something that's bringing yourself down, and then you would want to have something to substitute with, which would be, let me think about that. I do know, give me a moment, something along those lines, so that this comes down to literally rewiring your brain and your habits.
I've never heard that cancel technique, but I can feel how that would be, like if you're saying that in your head, that would be I think that could be pretty powerful.
Yes. And I'll sometimes, when I find myself sometimes like, oh my God, that's going to give me a heart attack. Like I'll use it I'll say something like that and I'll be like, oh my God, cancel. Like, no, I don't want to be under so much stress and I'm going to give myself a heart attack. So we say these kind of fun phrases, but the thing is they actually are meaningful, and our brain is processing what that is. So training yourself to rewire it, and cancel is really effective, doesn't cost anything, and it's kind of fun to get in the hang of doing.
Yeah, I'm going to write that one down. That's definitely one I'm going to try using. Okay, number 7. We're on number 7 now. This is one that I think women in particular tend to really do a lot, and that is not applying for a job and deciding that you're unqualified. And this doesn't just count in the corporate world where you're actually applying for a job. This could be going after a new client. This could be putting your work out there on display for people to see. It could be opening up a shop. It could be so many things. But
yes, I love that you said that. That's exactly what I was thinking when I read that out. Yes. Yeah, this is taking yourself out of the running before you've even started.
Yeah.
Women rock this one too. So I think it's once
I
again.
know there was something said a few years ago where along the lines that if a man feels he's 70% qualified for a job, he'll apply for it. If a
Mhm.
woman feels a woman will not apply unless she feels she's like 110%
Yes,
qualified.
that is based on a real study, actually. So
Is it really? Okay.
it's from a book called The Confidence Code, and the study was, I believe, with Hewlett Packard, HP.
Hmm.
And so what they found that people that were trying to move within the company into different jobs, the men who were doing this only felt they needed to be 60%
Mm,
confident, 60% of the
60.
skills that were required, 60, and women felt they needed to be 100%. Forbes also wrote an article about this, so it's really worth looking up. And actually, when I read this story, it dramatically changed how I operated through my life, my business, with clients. I think the article suggests that, so why don't you just aim for being 70% confident before you do something? And I love that.
Hmm.
You're never going to have everything on the list. And the idea of applying for a job is just an easy thing to picture because at some
Yeah.
point we've all applied for a job and it's like you see these lists of everything that the requirements, and you have to remember that's their wish list.
Yeah.
That's not what they actually are gonna get. No one's gonna have that. So, but again, back to the perfectionism, women think they need to have everything. And I've seen the most qualified people in my life be like, I can't apply, I'll send them a job or something. And I can't apply for that. I don't have this and this. And I was like, oh my gosh, you don't have to have that. You just need to be kind of in the general realm of what they're looking for in some of those qualifications. And so taking yourself out of the running is an awesome self-sabotage move because it's super effective, and basically you haven't even applied for the job and you've already visualized the rejection letter, so you're over and done with. It's game over. You've thought about the client and you're like, oh well, they're either going to ignore me or they're going to write me like an awful email back. So deciding you're unqualified, that's really just a perception in your head, and that's not trying is going to completely slow down your success. And of course, this is all rooted in fear. We don't want to be rejected. This is definitely in that world, but this is something you need to push through and be like, you know what, I'm just going to go for this, even though I'm not really ready.
Yeah, and you alluded to something really interesting there in that often we don't see ourselves as qualified, but the people around us do.
Mhm,
And it's so
mhm,
interesting that we can't see it, but other people
mhm,
can. And
mhm.
and yet we don't want to listen to these people who
Gosh, yeah, start listening to your friends, the people that are telling you you're amazing.
yeah.
They know
it's
you.
it's so funny. And you could sit there one moment and say, I'm not qualified for that, but then your girlfriend over there could be like, oh, I don't think I should do this. And you're like, yes, of course you can do it.
Yes,
But you
exactly. Your guys are like sitting beside each other,
within
feeling yeah, unqualified for different things, and then you're cheering each other on. It's hilarious. So one of the things, just again, always back to this awareness piece, is I'll notice when I hesitate on something.
Mhm.
So there's a moment which is interesting because even when I will say, like, even when I dropped you an email because I was really a fan of your podcast, and I was like, you know what, I hesitated, and there was that moment of like, does she really want to be interested? Is she going to be interested in what I have to say? Or her listeners? Like, there's always a moment that I will catch myself in that, like, I don't really want to do this. I'm feeling really uncomfortable. And then you know what I do? I press send. I always press send. I
Yeah.
don't. I just go for it. And if someone gets back to me, that's great. If they reject me, I'm kind of okay with that too. I think one of the best parts of being a graphic designer is that you get so much rejection
Yes.
in your career because you're constantly having concepts turned down, and it literally
Yes.
trains you for this amazing ability to handle rejection. So by far one of, I think, a graphic designer's superpower is handling the rejection. But yeah, you just need to go for it and get into that uncomfortable space and see what happens, because you will get closer to success, like, absolutely.
Absolutely, and I think it's so important to remember that a no is not a no forever. It's
Mm-hmm.
you've heard the saying, it's a no for not right now.
Yes.
And it's you really do have to kind of build a little bit of a tough skin. It's really
Yeah.
hard not to take rejection
Yeah.
personally, especially I think creatives, we tend to be a
Uh,
little more
yeah.
sensitive and
Yeah. Yeah. It's
but
no fun.
it's
Yeah.
it's um it's funny, we in my other business we do a big conference, a 3-day conference every year, and one of my jobs is to pull together the speaker lineup. And every year after the event, I will get all these compliments, oh, you pulled together such a great lineup, how do you get these people to say yes to you?
Mhm.
And I'm like, you only see The 10, 15 people who said yes. You don't see the 30, 40, 50 people who said
Yes.
no.
Yeah, I
No
love
thanks.
that. I love that story. Yeah, that's an amazing example. Yes. Yeah, they say no, not
Yeah,
interested.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
and I've learned over the years it's nothing personal. It is sometimes it's a scheduling conflict. Sometimes it just doesn't fit into what they're focusing on in their business right now. Sometimes it's just we're not the right audience for them. There's so many reasons. It's never like, no, I don't want to do this, Melissa, because I don't really like you. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally true. That's a great point. And here's the thing, like, what if that person says yes, or what if you do get the job interview? Like,
Yeah.
then what? So then, like, that could be amazing, but then, then the fears start popping up. Oh my God, I can't. I'm gonna like. Then you get to the job interview and you're already thinking about, oh my God, I can't do this job. I'm not gonna be handled. The first week's gonna be mental. It's like you haven't even had the job interview and you're already like,
Talking yourself
catastrophizing.
out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talking yourself out of it. Yeah, yeah. So it's a good
Yes.
habit to watch out for.
It is. And I think you really do have to embrace being rejected. I remember hearing about a writer once who kept every single rejection notice he'd ever got because it might have even been Stephen King.
Maybe, yeah,
And he
he's
had
like,
them like with a
yeah.
posted to his wall with an actual stake. It was
Yes.
because he had so many of them, it didn't fit on a like a little nail in the wall. So he
That's
had them
awesome.
post-
Yeah.
but they were kind of a badge of honor for him. So
Yeah. And
it's
how amazing is that? Making the choice to take something that could be really devastating and turn it into a fuel for motivation, right? That's a
exactly.
choice that he made.
Yeah.
That's a conscious choice that he made to do that, which is incredible.
Yeah, think of a way to turn it around in your head. That's a
Yes,
really
for sure.
okay. Number 8, constantly remaining disorganized and
Mhm.
frantic.
Mhm.
Yes.
This can relate also to like number one, which is like the overeating,
Mm-hmm.
over scheduling. But generally, if you're feeling that you're always in chaos and always disorganized, I would ask yourself, how is that serving you?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people will be like, oh, it doesn't serve me because everything becomes, a gong show and I can't get out the door with my kids in the morning, everything. It's like, there's always a benefit. So what I love about the human experience is that, we don't do anything unless there's a benefit, unless there's a payoff. Nothing. We don't do anything unless there's a
Yes.
payoff. It doesn't matter how upsetting or how crazy. So staying frantic, disorganized is usually a really great way of also creating that distraction and creating the avoidance. So because you get to spend, if you stay disorganized, you're constantly focusing on trying to get organized so that you actually don't have to do the work that's going to
Yeah.
make you successful.
Yes. And I think I'm somebody I like orderliness when I'm doing certain things, and I like disorganization when I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing other certain things. But
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that we often put off is just taking a day out of our schedule to sit down in your office or your studio or wherever your workspace is and just being like, today's the day I'm just going to sort this all out, because
Yes.
it feels like, I don't know, for me, it always feels like I'm goofing off. Like it's not a real day
Yeah.
of work, but it
Yeah.
is a real day of work.
Oh, it is. Yeah. It's really important. If that's setting yourself up for
Mhm.
success, like if that's what it's going to take, then it's really important. And I would say to people who are just not naturally organized, do not beat yourself up about this, because some people are more naturally organized than
Yes.
others. But I will say, get yourself someone to help you. So whether that's a friend or there's amazing professional organizers now and systems, get someone to help you get organized, because you cannot use that as an excuse not to do what you really want to do and what you're meant to do with your life.
Yeah, it's an excuse you can only use so many times before
Yeah.
clients or
Yeah.
customers just get fed up.
It's super effective. It's a
Yeah.
really effective way of avoiding
Yeah.
stuff and keeping yourself small.
Okay, number 9, speaking negatively to others about yourself. This is when I catch myself doing all the time
Yeah. Yeah. The
without even realizing it. Yeah.
yeah, self-deprecating humor. No, I love it too. I love a good, like, I love humor. I think it's just the only way to function through life. But,
Yeah.
but what's interesting about this is you're actually lowering expectations of what you will deliver
Mhm.
or what you're capable of delivering.
Yep.
So you're setting yourself up for like that vanilla success, mediocrity. Like I really suck at this. I'm not so great at it. So I'm only going to deliver so much. It's definitely a form of self-sabotage.
Yeah, it's it's I think similar to when you get a compliment paid to you about your work or something, and this is the one I do all the time. I kind of laugh it off and say like, oh yeah, I could have done it faster if this, or I could have, you make a joke out of it kind of thing. And it's just like, just say thank you for the compliment.
Just thank you. Not too long ago, one of my friends, a girl I don't actually know too well, but we used to work together, and she sent me a text and she's like, I just love seeing that you're really always trying new things and putting yourself out there. And my immediate reaction was something self-deprecating. I wanted to text back and say, oh, like something stupid. And I was like, you know what I wrote back? I wrote thank you with a little emoji.
Yeah, just
called it a day. And I was like, that is my success. That is my win for the day, because I did not put myself down. I did not diminish what I was doing, because I was like, you know what? She's thinking I'm doing something great, and I'm going to just respect that, and I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. And that is also stepping into the energy of a successful person.
Yeah, I think some of it also comes from not wanting to appear cocky or overconfident. I think that's something that as women we tend to struggle with as well. Like we don't want to look like we're too big for our boots kind of thing.
No, almost. I totally agree.
Yeah, and which again, that's a whole other form of conditioning too that we have in our brains. So
we do.
But yes, I think that's just an easy way to deal with it. Just stop yourself and say, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Again, it's okay to make light of certain things, but if it's a habit and
if you're doing it
coming up all the time, it's like, sometimes this can also show up as like downplaying your talents and abilities. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'll just like talk down some skills that I have, and meanwhile, I know I can do them in my sleep and I'm amazing at them, but I'll just I'll talk it down, and that's a way of keeping myself small and further blocking my success.
Yes, definitely. Okay, last on the list is avoiding networking and keeping yourself isolated. And this one, as an introvert, this is super hard for me, but it is so necessary to push yourself out of the box here.
Yes. And when I wrote this list originally, it was before pandemic life. So whether we're like, so physically or virtually, this one's interesting because we talked about earlier that kind of victim mindset. So what's interesting is when you're avoiding like networking and talking to other people, you are able to sit in that victim mindset where no one can help me and I'm all alone, and it basically makes it harder for yourself. Meanwhile, there are thousands of people, I'm sure, even if you don't know them, who are willing to help you and help you succeed and want to connect with you and talk and have these like-minded conversations. So when you constantly isolate yourself, you are stopping yourself from potentially getting help, and that can be really challenging.
Yes, I think as somebody who is really introverted, one of the things I've noticed, this is so interesting, and I don't know the mechanics behind this, but if I'm going to a conference or a meeting or some kind of thing where I don't know anyone, or maybe I know one or two people in the room, but I'm just in the audience, or I'm sitting at a table at lunch with somebody while there's a break or something, I am terrified of reaching out and saying, hi, I'm Melissa, how come you're here, or whatever. Like that is so hard for me. And yet I host events all the time, and I can go into hostess mode, where I'm just like, I want everyone to have a good time. If I see somebody sitting in the corner, I will go talk to them because I don't want them to feel lonely or like nobody's. And I can do that without any issues, and yet flip the switch and I'm the person as the guest. And I completely, so I think one of the things I've tried to start doing is turn myself into the host even when I'm not the host.
That's exactly what you need to do. I was going to say, like, by the fact that you've done that hosting role and you're able to do that, so you have actual evidence and proof that you can do it.
Yes. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's just a switch I have to consciously, almost like an alter ego switch that I have to flick and be like, okay, today you're going to go in and you're going to be, my business partner calls it my e-card. I have to pull out my extrovert card, pull out your e-card and get out there.
It is harder for introverts for sure. So I'm like a weirdo 50-50 introvert extrovert hybrid, so I can kind of go into either role when I need to, which is kind of good. But I also get really drained at parties,
Right.
so I have to be like very careful of how much socializing I'm doing. And oh my gosh, the Zoom life was killing me for a while. It's like too much, right? But the other interesting thing when you are worried about networking is I started to realize that most people are dying for you to come up and say something to them and talk to them, and people love talking about themselves. So basically, if you go up to someone, introduce yourself virtually or in person, and you ask them any of those who, what, when, why, where questions, open-ended questions, they're going to start talking, and they're going to go and go and go, and you just nod your head, and then you've got now a new connection.
Yeah, and you didn't have to say hardly a word.
No, you probably won't have to say much because, some people just love to chat. Now, if you end up going to another really shy introvert, then it might be a little bit more challenging.
Right.
But the point is not to keep yourself alone, because that is definitely, it's going to make the way, listen, you can't build a business, any kind of business, without networking and connecting with other people.
Yes.
You just can't.
No, you can't. I mean,
No.
Heather and I talk about this all the time on the podcast. It's research and relationships. That's what building a business is all about. And you can't have a successful business without relationships at all different points and levels. And some of them are deep relationships, some of them are not. But if you're just sitting there by yourself, nobody's going to knock on your door trying to find you.
Yeah, that's totally true. And it makes, we can use external blocks as an excuse. So for example, we'll say, well, I want to get my, let's say, YouTube channel going, but I don't know how to edit video, so I'm never going to be able to do that. So that's an external block, is thinking that it's a skill that we need to do. But the chances are there's someone else that can do it for you, right? So you need to have that networking, your mind set to that networking channel, so that you can tune into someone who can actually help you. Because then if you actually have someone to help you, then you can do it. But sometimes we're just telling ourselves, well, I can't do it, and this block is in my way, and it's actually not true.
I know, it's interesting you say that, because I've always been good at hiring people to help me with as a VA or things like that. And in my previous career, I did a lot of hiring. So I'm not uncomfortable bringing people in or supervising people or having people work for me. But it's these little tasks that I always never think, like one-off tasks. And it wasn't until a friend mentioned to me not that long ago that she couldn't figure out how to do her Gmail signature. So she just hired somebody on Fiverr to do it for $5.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like that's a 15-second task. Well, not a 15-second, but that's a 5-minute task. And I would never have thought to even look somewhere like Fiverr for somebody who could do that for me. Right. And then I started thinking about all these other little tasks that I haven't done because I don't know how to do them. And I don't want to hire an assistant or an employee to do one or two little tasks. But there are people out there who can do them for you. Big tasks, little tasks.
Yeah, there's people that can do things for you, and then there's people out there who want what you're offering.
Yeah,
and that's a huge thing too. Is like someone out there. I always like to picture like there's someone out there looking for what I have to offer them, and I need to get to them because they need what I have.
That's right.
And it's going to be a win-win situation. They're going to love it. I'm going to love it. So that is the benefit of getting out there and not keeping yourself isolated. And nowadays, there's so many amazing virtual platforms for networking. It's great.
Absolutely. And there's so many places where you can put your work out there. There's so many, you could be that person on Fiverr who's doing Gmail signatures.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
But if you don't put yourself on Fiverr, you can't be that person. I'm not saying everybody should rush to Fiverr, but in general, you have to put yourself out there. It's just the only way, because as I mentioned, and I think a lot of us have a tendency to look at people who are more successful and say, oh, look at all the opportunities they get, all the things that come to them. It comes so easily for them. And no, it doesn't. You're sitting here looking at them, not doing anything to build your own network. And they're out there hustling.
They're hustling. Yeah. They're taking the opportunities that are kind of coming their way, or they're seeking them.
Or they're making the opportunities by connecting with the people that could help them. So, as hard as it is.
It's super hard. So the common theme to all 10 of these is you're going to be uncomfortable for all of these. There's just no way of getting around that. And if there's one thing that I think helps us succeed and grow is getting uncomfortable. And I make it a habit of doing that every day.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, just a few of
Mhm.
the things that maybe, so you mentioned that journaling is a great way that you can start to identify some of these patterns or become a little more self-aware of what
Yes.
you're doing. You also mentioned that a great way is to enlist your friends, like
Mhm.
especially if you're doing a lot of the self-talk or negative
Yes.
self-talk or the I don't knows or the
Yes.
jests.
Yeah, you can do that for sure.
um,
Um,
what are some other ways that you can kind of tackle this, or maybe what's a good way to kind of become, because I think a lot of us aren't aware necessarily that we're doing these things. So
yeah.
what are some ways that you can kind of increase your self-awareness, I guess would be the way to ask.
Yeah, and just a note on the friends. I once had to do an exercise where I actually had to email some friends. I think 5 friends was part of the exercise that my coach made me do. And it was like, get them to talk about you in like a positive way, like some things that you're amazing at.
Oh, that
I
would
will
be
tell you,
wonderful.
that was just, I wanted to barf my guts out. I was like, just don't make me do this, but I've got to do this because she's telling me I have to do this. I paid her money, so I'm going to do this. If you're feeling brave, that is, it was a really enlightening exercise. I don't regret doing it. I'm not going to say talk about being uncomfortable. I'm just not great at taking that kind of praise, I guess,
Yeah.
or But so yeah, that's one thing you could do with your face. So back to the self-sabotage is it's different ways of getting to the awareness. I like, so I'm really big into setting an intention every day. This is something I started about a year ago, and I intentionally started setting an intention. Whereas every morning I go out into my garden actually, and I'm in my pajamas and I throw my rain boots on that are outside, like I keep by the door. So I don't know what my neighbors think, but I set the intention for the day. And so one of the things that you can do is set your intention to start noticing your self-sabotage behaviors, like where you're cutting your, like selling yourself short, where you're making things more difficult. So if you start the day with that kind of asking that question to get the awareness, you will start actually being more conscious of how you're moving through the day.
It is. It's really interesting. I actually do that too. I
Mm-hmm.
don't go out in my rainbows, but it's an
Yeah.
actual line that I have in my planner every day. Like it's the
I
first thing
love
I
it.
do when I sit down at my desk is write what my intention is for the day, and then I write 3 things that I'm grateful for, and
Mm-hmm.
and I've been doing it for about a year as well, and it
Mm-hmm.
really helps me focus my day. I love it.
Oh, life changing, life
Yeah,
changing.
it's extremely helpful, but it's like that sort of thing, when you buy a new car and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you notice all the other people driving the same car as
Yes.
you, like
Yeah.
it you might not think it's a big deal, but your brain does process that
Oh,
and starts
yes.
noticing and picking up on all these things. So,
Yeah, you have to decide. So once you start thinking about self-sabotage or wondering, like, maybe how am I? You have to make that decision that you want to start
mhm.
uncovering your self-sabotage because you may want to still stay in avoidance and not think about it. So I always think everything I always say, decide now. So decide now that this is actually something that you want to look at. Now, I'm giving you like all these small, kind of funny, almost funny things that we do. There's usually that back to that idea of fear. There's a big, like almost like your thesis of why you could be self-sabotaging,
Yeah.
and sometimes that actually requires like talking to a therapist or talking to a coach or getting outside help to actually really uncover it because we all have blind spots and we just can't see it.
Yes. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think
Yeah.
it's something, I think as we get older, we do tend to become more self aware, but
Mhm.
some people don't. And sometimes when you're younger, you just don't have the experience to
You don't.
recognize what
I
you're
did
doing.
not
Yeah,
notice that this was going
me
on in my
either.
20s. It wasn't until my 30s that I was like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
making things way harder than they need to be. I'm always about reading too, and I've had 2 particular books change my life, and when you just keep reading and you're going to stumble across a book, and there was one book that really helped me figure out why my big overarching thesis as to why I was self-sabotaging became really clear. And after that moment, that's probably about 5 years ago now, my life has never been the same. I can't do things the same. It's completely different. I push myself completely differently. I always get uncomfortable. I do all these things that I'm suggesting because I know, I don't want to do what I did
Yeah.
before because I don't want those same results. So keep reading any book that resonates with you and just keep going. And if you don't like one book, go to the next one. And I'm just like a huge fan of a believer in surrounding yourself with, podcasts like this are amazing for opening up your brain to just think differently.
Yeah, sometimes you just need somebody else to point it out to you.
Yeah. And how many times has someone said the same thing 100 times and then we hear it, someone else say it, we're like, oh, I get it now. you know?
Yes, exactly.
It's like we might have heard the same thing from Oprah for how many decades, and then some random person on a podcast says something similar, and
And
it completely clicks for
it
you.
just clicks. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sometimes you
yeah,
just need to be in the right headspace to recognize
yeah.
it. Or,
Hmm.
um, so Alana, you work as a coach specifically with designers and creatives,
Hmm.
who, as we said earlier, know they can do better, but they're not
Yeah.
sure what's like holding them back. And if you are looking, it's funny because the last episode I recorded was on the difference between coaches, masterminds, and mentors.
Yes,
And
very
so
different. Hmm.
so this really falls into that. But for those of you who are maybe wondering, like, here I am, I'm struggling,
Yeah.
I don't seem to be getting any further ahead. There are
Yeah.
people like Alana that you can go talk to. Maybe that's something you could just briefly tell us about
Yeah.
before we wrap up, is a little bit about what you do, but also like how to find a coach that you connect with.
Yeah, it's really important you do find someone that you're on the same page with and
Mm-hmm.
connect with. And I've worked with a lot of different coaches. So for me, part of the reason I got into coaching is I was obsessed with personal development. I mean, I started reading like I would be reading psychology today, like 16, just for fun on the side. And then finally, really decided to get into it as a profession a few years ago. And I hired coaches. And the thing is, I saw the benefit for me. So I've also worked with therapists for different times in my life. I've worked for different people for different seasons of my life. But for me, coaching was amazing because they can see those blind spots that we talked about, and your friends or family are usually not the person to be able
Mm-hmm.
to help you with certain things and to see things objectively. So a coach is trained to see things objectively, and they're never giving you advice. They're helping you take the next step that's best for you and come up with a plan, but it's always something that resonates with you,
Yes, I think that's a
which is
great
really
point. Yeah.
fascinating.
Okay, and actually, for those of you who are listeners to the show, Alana has an offer for all of you, which is really nice of her. Do you want me to tell them what it is, or do you want to?
I can tell them. I can
Sure,
tell
go
you what
ahead.
it is. So my signature program is called the Clear and Confident Maven, and this is about getting clarity and feeling confident. I'm a huge advocate for really gaining that confidence, and the reason why I use the word Maven is I believe every one of us is an expert, a real good expert, and it's a matter of like bringing that out and bringing that confidence. So I do a 6-session coaching package, and it's pretty interesting because the first session is always I do something called an energetic leadership index assessment, which is a total mouthful. An
Yeah, what
ELI
is
for
that?
short. Yeah, it's really cool and it's proprietary. You have to be kind of licensed to do it. And what it is an attitudinal assessment. And this is you get an assessment, you answer a bunch of questions. I think it's about 80 questions. And then we get some data back. And basically, I'm able to see your general disposition, how you're showing up on a good day and how you're showing up under stress.
Mm.
And it's kind of measured in different different levels. And so I can see if you're let's say, for example, that you're a people pleaser and you're always going into, or you like to go into victim mode, or you're a dreamer and you want to go into you really like to be in that peaceful, non-conflict state. So I get this data, we do a debrief on it, and then from there, we're really able to set up the coaching sessions and kind of delve into what's important to you and take this information and start to see how you're showing up and what those default settings are. Yeah, and break them.
There
Yeah.
you go. The offer that she's giving is $200 off her signature coaching program, Clear and Confident Maven. It's 6 sessions. The coupon code you can use is "and she looked up." We will have all of this in the show notes, as well as a link to Alana's website and her shop where you can use the coupon. But if this is a great way, if you are really thinking that you need some help to get to the next level, it's a new year, a new start. And I know a lot of us out there are thinking about, whether or not we should invest in ourselves this year. The answer is you should always be investing in yourself in some way.
100%.
So,
Yeah.
so this is a really great opportunity. She works specifically with creative professionals, which is what most of you are. And so that's a really great offer. Thank you so much for offering that up, Alana. That was really
Oh, you're welcome. And
generous
I
of you.
also offer, just so you know, like with any coach too, just talking about how you find a coach, it's all about that kind of synergy and the resonance. And
Mm-hmm.
I do a 20-minute free consultation, and most coaches do. So if you're looking
Yes.
for someone, like that's a great, like just dive into that, take advantage of that, because you can tell a lot when you have that initial conversation. Because sometimes it's not a fit.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not a bad thing. If it's not a
No,
fit, it's just
no,
not a fit. And
not a fit.
but yeah, when you have a conversation, you just kind of click with somebody.
Exactly.
You kind of know that they're the
Yeah,
person you want to work with. So
exactly.
Where else can we find you online, Alana, if people are looking for you?
Yeah, so my website is www.alanaruoso.com, and I am on Instagram and Facebook at Alana Ruoso. And I just joined Clubhouse, so I'm also at Alana Ruoso.
Oh, I just joined Clubhouse too. I'll have to find you on there.
Okay,
I
we'll
haven't figured it out yet. But
Okay.
I'm trying to find an expert on Clubhouse so we can actually do an episode on it. But it's so new. I think there's a lot of people who are still figuring it out. So
I will tune into that episode.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alana. It has been such a pleasure having you here. And this has been, I hope, a really eye-opening episode for people. I definitely got a lot out of just chatting with you, and these were all things that I was aware of, but I still got an awful lot from having you here today, so I really appreciate it, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining us this week. I will be back next week with another new episode, and we'll talk to you all then. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshелookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshелookedup.com or come say hi on Instagram at andshелookedup. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.